So back in the day, I spent a lot of time fishing primarily for bass. I would throw around, worm bobber. I'd catch a bunch of different things too, but I started crappie fishing, and I can say that has definitely changed my game, and I absolutely love it. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly what I did to start catching a ton of crappie, and you're going to be able to walk away and catch some crappie too. If you're a beginner when it comes to catching crappie, this is the video for you. So when I first started trying to catch crappie, specifically, it probably took me a few weeks to catch my first one. Now, I've caught them every now and then, just on random stuff. I remember one time I caught one on a bandito bug, and it was massive. I primarily started fishing for crappie because it was a new challenge, and I embrace every challenge I can take. And I wanted to enhance my fishing. And I wanted to try some new things fishing. It was a lot of fun, fishing for bass, but I wanted to try something a little different, catch fish in a different style. I wanted to catch fish in a different type of way. So I first went out with a medium light bass rod. I had light line, and I was throwing around like a jig, and I just wasn't getting bit. And then I finally caught one. I'm like, oh sweet, this is awesome, but it took weeks. So I started doing some research, and I was able to put together some of the things I wish I would have done or I would have known before I went out and started fishing for crappie. So the number one thing, so the first thing I wish I would have known and done properly is had the right tackle. What I mean by this is I needed an ultralight rod, I needed a light reel, spinning reel, so I can get light jigs out further and cover more water. I was using a bass rod, and those light jigs, I couldn't cast them very far, so I really wasn't, I wasn't covering a broad area, so my probability was a lot less I was going to catch a crappie. And just by downsizing to an ultralight and, that light spinning reel, I was really able to enhance, what I was able to do, and I started catching crappie. Now, Now, a lot of people use monofilament when they fish for crappie, up to anywhere from 2 to 6 pounds, which you can do, and it does work. Me, myself, personally, I'm a braid guy, so I use 10-pound braid to a 4-pound monofilament leader. I tie that leader on with a double uni knot, tie it to a jig, whatever I'm using to fish for those crappie, and it works great for me. Can't stress the importance of this because with that ultralight, you're going to feel those bites. Now, when I was using my bass rod, I can only imagine I got bit, and I just didn't know if it was a bite or if it was a snag because there wasn't that sensitivity behind it that you need with an ultralight. And once I was able to identify that thump, I was able to put them in the boat. Another thing I wish I knew is when I was fishing for bass, I primarily fished in shallow. Crappie are known to be shallow in the spawn, but throughout the year, they're in that mid-level, They're by drop-offs. They're by deeper water. They're not necessarily in the deepest part of the lake, but they're not necessarily shallow most of the year either. So I picked up fish brain, and I used that to check out the depths at the lakes I was fishing at. Now, I'm not a sponsor of fish brain or anything like that, but you can definitely use fish brain to your advantage. See, I look through the map, and as I'm looking through, I look for spots where it goes from shallow to deep really fast, or what you would call a drop-off. And I would start to fish those areas on fish brain. And just, I was looking, I would mark some spots off on the map, and I would go to those spots and fish them, with my ultralight gear, just because I knew there was a higher probability that I was going to catch crappie in those locations. Also, another cool tip with fish brain is if you have the pro version, you can see exactly where people are catching those fish. So if you see people on there and they're catching crappie, I would recommend trying those spots out because they're there. Especially if they're taking pictures right where they're catching them, that's a great indication of that, hey, there's crappie there. And the cool thing about that is you can see the time of year, it gives you the date, it gives you the temperature, gives you the conditions. You can use all these things to your advantage. So for the second thing, I would say location, but doing that research into that location is definitely important. I want to add that you can use a fish finder, and I would probably recommend, but I know that's not an option for everyone. And I didn't use a fish finder for the longest time, and I was still catching a lot of crappie. The fish finder makes it a lot easier because you get the exact depths of where, where you're at, and you can use that to your advantage. You can find drop-offs. You might go over some brush that you didn't know was there, that you're not going to see on those maps, and you can fish that brush with you can fish that brush with your fish finder. It definitely makes things a lot easier when fishing for crappie. I got a cheap fish finder. I used the Garmin Striker 4. It cost me a couple $100. Just attach it to my kayak, and it works wonders. It does great. So no complaints from me. I do have a link on I do have a video on my YouTube channel of how I installed that fish finder to my kayak, in case you wanted to give it a try. Plus, I attached everything I used, to mount that to my kayak, all the stuff you'll need. But there's still lakes that I go to that I'm very familiar with where I don't even bother using the fish finder. I've caught crappie in those locations for a long time, so I know exactly where they are, and I use that to my advantage too. So that's another thing I want to add is knowing your lake. If it's a lake that you know, definitely use that to your advantage, because you can use that to continuously catch crappie. If you've caught one before, they're in that location. I would also, when you go out to a lake and you might see people leaving and stuff, or going in, it doesn't hurt to talk to them, because any advice they give you, you can use that to your advantage. So always keep an open ear, communicate with people, and that's going to help you catch them too. Now I'm going to say the third thing is using the right lures, right baits. Now what I mean by that is you want to go as small as possible. You're gonna want to use a 16th ounce, a 32nd ounce, as big as an 1/8 ounce, depending on how deep your lake is and the conditions, if it's windy or not. I primarily use a 16th ounce jig with whatever trailer I'm using on it, whether it be a baby shad, a tube, anything like that, or a marabou jig, hair jig, whatever. I'm always trying to use a 16th ounce. That's my confidence bait. If I'm using a slip bobber, I will use a 1/32nd ounce jig, just because I feel like when I'm fishing with a slip bobber, I'm fishing relatively slow anyway, so letting that bait fall super slow just increases the chances of getting bit. And the cool thing with a slip bobber is it's not going to get pulled by the wind as much, because that bobber is going to normally keep it generally in that location where you cast it to. It's not going to move as fast as just a free line being taken by the wind. Also, when it's windy, I highly recommend using Beetle spins, or small crankbaits, for whatever reason. When using light jigs, light lures, that wind is really going to mess up your presentation. So how do you counteract that? Use something a little bit heavier, something that's going to keep you in that strike zone. So when you use a Beetle spin, it's got that little spinning blade. For whatever reason, it just fights against that current, and it keeps that in the location of where the fish are at. And then obviously a crankbait works very well, because that crankbait, you're constantly moving. You can stop it, and it pauses for the most part. It's pretty, it works well with the wind. Another thing that is very important, especially if you do not have a fish finder, is if you're going out and you're on a decent sized lake, and you mark some spots on FishBrain that you want to go to, and you're going to travel across the lake to try and find those spots, I would recommend trolling. Now, you don't have to have a mount on your kayak or boat or whatever you're using to troll. Like sometimes when I first started, I would just keep the pole in between my legs and hold it down and have it over the side as I was paddling. And the importance of that is, if you get bit while you're trolling, that tells you right there that, hey, look, there's crappie right where I was at. And that's going to, tip you off to where you should try and fish. And then also, there have been days where I just haven't been catching anything at all, and I started trolling around, and I would catch fish. It's weird, and it's not necessarily the most fun way to fish, but if you're trying to put some fish in the boat, to bring home and make dinner with, or lunch or snack, whatever, freezer, whatever you're doing with them, trolling is a good way to put numbers in the boat. So for one of my last tips, that is equally as important as the other three, is once you got the right tackle, the right location, the right area on your lake, all that stuff, time of year, you've factored in all these things, and you're putting yourself in the highest probable parts of the lake that where crappie should be, or you should be able to put some crappie in the boat. I'm going to say is that this is so important, is that you're constantly changing your lure until you find what they want. Now, rule of thumb is If the water is pretty clear, use a more natural style looking lure. So if it's super clear and you can see to the bottom, use like, you know, your silvers, your natural style bluegill, green, you know, stuff like that. Stuff that you would normally see fish color eat in, you know, clear water. Now when you get into that dirty water or that tannic water where the visibility isn't, you know, not too much, and like you look down the water and it just turns to blackness because the bottom, the vegetation and stuff, it's just very tannic at the bottom, or it's super muddy. That's when you want to get into your bright and dark colors, you know, like your bright pinks, your glowing chartreuse, you know, your whites, straight bright whites, you know, stuff like that. That's where you're going to want to do that kind of stuff. And I forgot to add, when you're in the clear water, that's where you want to use the translucent color, you know, the see-through style baits. I also want to add, along with color, the style of bait that you're using too works wonders. So if you're throwing around a simple minnow style bait and you're not getting bit, try switching to a tube, you know, and then if that's not getting bit, switch to a marabou jig. I usually try to stick to the 15-minute rule if I'm casting around and I'm not catching anything. I try to switch my lure every 15 minutes until I find out what they're biting. And then sometimes after they bit for a long time and you've caught a bunch of fish and they just stop, they just turn off, then it's time to switch baits too. I would have to say my number one go-to color is orange and a chartreuse tail. For whatever reason, that bait just seems to be the best for me. It's a confidence bait, as they would call it. Then followed by, very closely, number two is the pink and the chartreuse tail. Those two colors for me work great in all conditions of water. If I go out and I'm not trying something new and I just want to catch some fish, those are the two colors I go with primarily. So if you're going out crappie fishing, you want to catch a lot of crappie, or you want to catch one crappie for whatever reason, I hope that you know you don't make the same mistakes I did, and this can kind of cut your learning curve so that you can get out there and put fish in the boat, you know, a little bit quicker than I did. That's what I'm doing this for, is I'm just trying to share my experiences. So I appreciate everyone for watching. Thank you guys so much. It means so much to me. I just, you know, want to help everyone improve and you know, catch more fish. You know, it's like, this is such a healthy thing to do, you know, and I'm just glad people love doing it. So thank you so much for watching. Get out there, fish every single second of the day that you can. You know, don't abuse your family. Don't abuse your, you know, work stuff, your necessities that you got to get done. But any spare time, you need to be out on that water catching fish, man. It just something about being out there in nature, just so healthy for you. So, hey, thank you guys again for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comment section. If there's anything you want to see in the future, you know, feel free, let me know. I'm here for it. And, you know, I appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. Later.